Hello, hi everyone. Welcome to this session on how to create a perfect action plan for GMAT and how to get a 750 plus on the very first attempt. I'm Piyush. I'm going to be your host today in the session. So before I proceed any further, if you guys can let me know if you can hear me loud and clear, that would be really great to know. So do let me know if you guys can hear me properly in the chat here. It's going to be a really interesting session. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. And in fact, I'm going to help you guys understand how the entire GMAT thing works, how should you go about creating an action plan out of it, and everything from the scratch. So do let me know if you're able to hear me, guys, in this chat over here. That will be great to know if you are able to hear me loud and clear. So I think my audio should be fine because I did a proper audio testing, and on the live view also it seems to be fine. So in the meantime, you guys tell me about the audio. I'm anyway gonna proceed and give my intro. So in the meantime, if you guys can tell me if there's any issue with the audio that you guys are facing. And also very important thing, if you want to view this slides properly, just make sure that in your settings you select the quality of the audio as SD. Don't let it be auto, so some slides might become hazy for you. If you select SD, that is the best way to go about it. Okay, thank you so much, Kennel, for letting me know that. And feel free to tell me more about yourself, guys, from where you are, what do you do. I'll be more than happy to actually know about you. And I love interacting with people. That's something which I definitely love about the work that I do. In fact, I have been in this industry for almost 9 years now. I've been helping students, mentoring students, getting into their top B schools. This year, we have helped multiple people get into Harvard, Wharton, Marshall, Schulich, Kellogg, a lot of different schools across the globe. And over the years, you name a school, and I've definitely helped one or more students get into it. So I've been in the industry for more than 9 years. I have prepared and taught for CAT and GMAT both. Again, CAT is like an Indian test that a lot of Indian test takers take. So I prepared for both. I have taught for both. So I've been on both sides. I've been on your side. I have been a struggler first, and from there, I have come on the other side. I have helped people from my understanding of how things worked out for me, what worked, what did not work. I scored a 740 on the GMAT on my very first attempt with a quant 50 and a verbal 41 and a 99.9 percentile on CAT. And personally, I love analyzing data and coming up with strategies. And this session is all about strategies. A lot of it is going to be data driven as well. A lot of data we are going to look at, a lot of information that we are going to look at. We'll try to structure your GMAT prep better. See, the entire objective of this session is to kind of help you get an idea how you can get that very first attempt right. Okay, that's the most important thing, because many people come to us at GMATWhiz after doing like 1 year of prep, 2 years of prep, also sometimes 6 months, sometimes 4 months. And I've seen a very common trend. Even people who have done 4 months of prep, or people who have done 2 years of prep, in most of the cases, they end up taking almost similar amount of time to improve their scores. The reason for that, when I ask myself, is primarily if you have to ace the GMAT, you have to do a certain set of tasks. And if you do those tasks right, you can actually nail the test in the very first attempt. So in this session, we are going to help you understand how to go about doing all of that. So let me first understand your current GMAT prep stage. So I have kind of divided the entire, like the various categories in which you can belong into 4 broad buckets. So do let me know in the chat here by mentioning 1, 2, 3, 4 about in which bucket do you belong. Are you someone who is yet to start your prep, or you have started and it has just been less than 30 days since you have started, less than 1 month? Or are you someone who has been doing your prep for 1 to 2 months now? When I say prep, I mean GMAT preparation. And are you someone who has been preparing for 3 to 6 months, or are you someone who has been preparing for more than 6 months? The reason I'm asking this question is I have some slides which are there where I'm going to talk a little more about people who are like, for people who are beginners, to give them an overview about how the entire GMAT works, how the MBA deadlines and application things work. So basically, if you guys are like a lot of you are in the first bucket, that will help me understand if I should focus on that aspect, or should I move directly to the more experienced fellows. Okay, so I do see responses coming in. Great, guys. So Yogesh says I'm in 1, KK, Sunny, both are in 1. Jana says started from GRE. So I'm assuming that you're in 1 for GMAT as well. Sanjay is in the same in 1 as well. Roger is in 2. Abhishek in 2. So I see a lot of people in 1, and like few of you are in 2 as well, and very few are in 3 and 4. So again, people who are in the first 2 buckets are more or less similar. Like even if you have been preparing for like let's say 1 to 2 months now, you're very much new to the entire prep thing. So assuming that most of you are in number 1, so I'm gonna give you a brief overview of beginners about how GMAT really works, what are the timelines look like. For example, I'm gonna cover these as a few aspects around this. Now, this is just an overview. This is not the main objective of the current session. So the thing that I'm getting into will like raise a lot of queries in your mind. But since this is just an overview to give you an approximate idea about things instead of you going ahead without having any idea, I'm not going to entertain a lot of queries around this pointers which I'm going to cover next, but I'm going to entertain all kind of queries. Please feel free to participate in the session for your GMAT preparation strategy, which is the main focus of the session today. So any one of you who is watching this recording later on, if you are not a beginner, you can skip maybe the next 5 to 6 minutes if you want to. So what I'm going to cover for the beginners is what is basically a typical MBA application intake and timelines. How do one round differ from another? And very quickly, I'll cover all this. What is the ideal time for you to write GMAT? A lot of people these days ask me that, okay, Piyush, I'm just a fresher. I want to get in the college next year. When should I be writing the GMAT? So let me talk about that as well. I will talk also about what GMAT score is good enough for you, like what is a decent GMAT score if you want to apply in the top schools. Then I'll talk about the time required to prepare for the GMAT as well. Approximately how much time will you take to actually get prepared for the GMAT? Because I'm sure a lot of you who are freshers or beginners will have these questions in their mind. And how does GMAT scoring work? Because GMAT in itself is a very complex test. It's a very different test, let me put it this way. The entire algorithm of GMAT is basically adaptive. It works in a very different way from other tests. So it is very important that we understand how this works as well. So this part, this fifth phase is even more important for people who are in 2, 3, and 4 buckets. Basically, people who have been preparing as well for quite some time. This will be important for you guys as well. But the first 4, I'm just giving an overview to others who have just started their journey so that they have an idea about what they are really preparing for. Because in general, if you don't know about the first 4 things and you continue to prepare, there is a very high chance that you will end up making mistakes which you will later repent for, and you'll not have time to work on those then. So let's focus on the first one. Now, what does the application timeline look like? Now, I'm an Indian, and many of you who are here are Indians. I've taken 2 like Indian broad B schools, again very popular ones, the IIMs and the ISB. So generally for IIMs, the deadline is around August mid to end. ISB generally has their deadline in September mid. That's the round 1, the first round when the app open the application for the September, the next year intake. Let me call it that way. So Indian colleges generally start a little earlier. They start in April to June around that time. So these are the deadlines, round 1 deadlines, and round 2 deadlines a little later. ISB has been shifting their deadlines around 15 days earlier these days, so it can also be there in August end. Now, in general, US and Canadian schools, and again, I'm talking about the fall intake. Fall intake is basically the when the batch starts around August, September, around the time. So if you're looking at that August intake or September intake for US and Canadian schools, generally the round 1 is going to be somewhere between September mid to October mid. So that is the timeline that you guys are looking at. And directly after that, then generally the next round, which is round 2, is right after Christmas, which will be around January mid to January end. Now, there are schools which have a spring intake, or let's say the Jan intake as well. If you are looking at a Jan intake, which is not that popular, as in most people go for the fall intake, if you're looking at the Jan intake, the round 1 deadlines will start this year, March or April itself. So again, you have to poise your GMAT journey around that. But since fall intake is the more popular one, I'm going to focus more on this part when I talk about when is the ideal time to write the GMAT as well. Now, when it comes to European schools, generally they have their first round September mid to end. Very few of them will have their first round in October. In fact, some might even have their first round starting as early as August as well. And generally, the concept in European B schools is that they have multiple rounds. So, for example, in US schools, they will mostly have a round 1 in September, a round 2 in Jan, a round 3, which is the last round for international candidates, which is around Feb end or March beginning, and around 4 maybe depending on if there are seats left. This could be around May, April for the domestic candidates, as in people who are US citizens or residing in the US. So again, this is the general technical definition of the rounds, which was started mostly by the US schools. In Europe, on the other hand, instead of following this traditional definition, between round one and round two, they might have one or two additional rounds. So rounds is nothing but their way of reducing their workload. They don't want to like work with all the pile loads of applications at one time. So many colleges in Europe and some in US as well have started having multiple rounds between round one and round two. So their definition of round two, lingo of round two could be very different, but you get the broad idea. So when you generally apply, when you apply in round one, the chances of getting a scholarship increases significantly. The reason for that is very simple. When you're just applying in round one, that's the very first round, these schools have the entire kitty of funds available with them. So they have a free hand on funds. That's number one. Compared to round two, they will have exhausted some funds. The second reason why the chances of scholarship are slightly higher in round one is because they might not have they know that, okay, if you are applying in round one to a certain school, you might as well apply in round two to another school, which is like, let's say, a dream school for you. And you might take your chances. If you get a scholarship from another school in round two, you might as well leave your seat in round one. So again, for multiple reasons, generally what we have seen is people applying in round one have a slightly better chance, slightly more chance of getting scholarship. I am not saying that schools don't give scholarships in round two. There are a few schools which categorically mention that they don't give scholarships in round two, but most of them will even give you scholarship in round two, but the chances of getting a scholarship will reduce significantly. So generally, it is important that you kind of look at round one deadlines. Now, if you look at round one deadlines, you understand that you have to submit your application somewhere in the window of August to October. Right? This is your window, basically, depending on which country, which continent, which college are you applying to. So it is very important that you are able to complete your application work by then. So let's understand what is the ideal time to then write the GMAT. Now, let me ask you guys this question. Before I answer this for you, what do you think, guys, is the ideal time to write the GMAT in that case? What do you think is the ideal time to write the GMAT, guys? You have got some understanding of how the rounds work. So what do you think is the ideal time to write the GMAT? Let's hear from you. May is what Vedant says. Good point, May. Vedant. What about others? May, June. KK says the same. Good. Why May, June, guys? Like August is the deadline. Why are you looking at May, June then? Spring the year before to give time for a retest. Very good point, Retro. I really like that thought process. ASAP says Sarthak. Sarthak, I agree with you as well. That's a very unique way to think about it. Sanjay says 20 days before deadline. That's that's in my personal opinion, that's the worst thing to be done. If you are sitting in Jan and you're thinking about 20 days before the deadline, you should not do that. See, ideally, in my opinion, you should be taking the GMAT when you are ready to take the GMAT. I guess there was one who said ASAP. Sarthak said ASAP. So it is basically whenever you're ready to take the GMAT, you should take the GMAT. But just to give you an approximate idea, my recommendation is to get done with your a GMAT, plan it by June max. Ideal time, May to June in this duration. Try to complete this attempt, this first attempt of yours, or let's say, and you should not think of it like this, that, okay, this is going to be my first attempt, I'll have another attempt. No, you should give your 100%. You should give your 100% basically to kind of get your GMAT done in the May-June attempt itself. But it is always very important that you keep some time available for a retest, as some of you are saying, some you are saying as well, some of you are saying. So it makes sense to give yourself a little bit of time, a little bit of cushion. So in case things don't go in the right direction, when I say things don't go in the right direction, what I mean by that is, let's say you are feeling anxious during the test. Many people have that anxiety when they're taking the test for the very first time. They have not taken any of the competitive tests in their life. So those things could be a big issue. Okay, so very important that you have a planned attempt as well, a reattempt as well, in case that is required. And what you do by doing this is that, let's say your application is in September or August as well, you are giving yourself a good amount of time to write your applications. And understand this, guys, I'm talking about writing your applications over here. I'm not talking about research. Most people also focus on doing the research at this stage only. That's a very wrong thing to do. In my personal opinion, if you're starting your prep now, let's say you're starting your prep in Jan, ideally, to the entire duration of your GMAT attempt, in this entire duration, around 4 to 5 hours per week, in my opinion, you should give to your research work. You should try to focus on the research around your B school, your target B schools, what do they look at in a candidate, and try to speak to alums, try to speak to adcoms, try to even speak with students, try to get as much data points as possible, because understand it this way, GMAT is just one thing in the bigger picture of things. Like, schools are looking at your seriousness towards the program, because MBA is something which you're going to probably do only once in your life, and it's a significant investment. So schools want to understand that have you done enough research on it. And when we work with candidates for their applications as well at GMATWhiz, what we see is many people have not done any research at all about the schools. And then when they start working on their applications, either they take a lot of time to do the research, or they are not able to come up with the best possible answers. They have a lot of good things to talk about in their curriculum, like CV, but they're not able to relate to it because they don't know what the school is really looking at. For example, Kellogg as a school focuses a lot on change, a lot on like leadership and the kind of change that you bring in the society around you. What kind of value do you create? So if you know that Kellogg focuses on these skills or these activities, you can work on your profile around those things. You can work on highlighting those things in a better way. So please make sure that you do the research around this time, and keep August and September for writing your applications, because trust me, guys, your applications are very, very critical part of your entire, like the SOPs and the LORs are very, very important part of your application. So please make sure you have enough time for it. So approximate idea of ideal time for GMAT. Now, what should be your target GMAT score? What should the target GMAT score look like? Now, this is a very difficult question to answer. Now, if you are from an overrepresented pool, okay, let's put it this way: overrepresented pool, and let's say less represented pool. Okay, so if that is the condition, and you're looking at schools in the US which are ranked between 1 and 10, and again, it's not like in schools in rank 1 and 10 in US will only look at your GMAT score. In fact, even after having a very high GMAT score, they might still reject you because your profile is not great. But I'm just giving you an idea. If you're from an overrepresented school pool, you are looking at a 750 plus minimum. Over here, if you're from a less represented pool, again, these are just average numbers which I'm giving you. Doesn't mean that people don't get in with a lower score. They always look at your profile as well, guys. Understand it this way. If you're applying to rank 11 to 20, and again, I'm giving you approximate ideas over here, guys, just to give you a sense of what kind of target score you should aim for. These are the numbers that basically you are looking at. Okay, and if you are looking at, let's say, 21 to 30 from an overrepresented school pool, then you are looking at a 700 plus. Ideally, the higher the better. And over here, around a 670 plus is significant. It's good enough. Now, when it comes to Europe, on the other hand, Europe is not like top 5 in Europe. Basically, they're not very, they don't require a very high GMAT score. So 710 plus is also sufficient, but is what we have seen. And for a less represented pool, even a 680, 690 plus is a good score in Europe. If you're looking at ISB for that matter, overrepresented pool as an IT male engineer, definitely look at a 720 plus kind of a number. Less represented pool, again, even a 670, 680, they will be good and happy enough for that. IIM's top 3, if I talk about ABC, then about 700 is a decent enough score. A less represented pool, even a 670, 680 will work for you. So that's pretty much your target scores. Again, I've just given a rough idea, and I know a lot of you might have a lot of questions in mind, but as I said very clearly, the objective of the session is not this. Objective is to kind of think about the GMAT strategy. But these are important things, because unless you know what your target score is, you cannot really aim for that. You cannot really prepare for that or create a plan of action for the same. So this is very, very critical for you guys to understand. Now, what is the prep time required for the GMAT? So let's like divide that as well. So let's look at like different categories of students. Okay, let's look at people who are decent, people who are exceptional, let's say, in their academics, and then there could be people who are weak. But let's talk about these two categories broadly, because most of you will belong in this category, is what I'm assuming over here. So let's say you're targeting something around a 750 plus. So if you're a decent enough student, like above average, slightly above average, and a decent enough student, you would take somewhere around 300 to, I would say, 350 hours of prep time, basically, for your GMAT. If you're looking at, let's say, something around a 700 plus approximately, then you're looking at somewhere around 200 to 250 hours of prep time. So just to give you guys an idea, like we had this one student, Hardik, who belonged to similar category, was able to score a 740 on GMAT in about three months, approximately 2.5, 3 months of prep when he was working full time. So again, I'll request my team to share the story. You guys can actually, if you want to see how this guys worked, you can actually watch out their stories later on. But this is just basically to give an approximate idea about over here. Now, if you're exceptionally good, then in this case, about exceptional students might take about 100 to, let's say, 150 hours to get to a 750 plus. When I say exceptional students, people who are in the best colleges in their countries, have cleared some similar exams in the past and all of that. So you will take about 100 to 150 hours of prep time. Now for a 700 plus, again, like if you're exceptional, this could be a cakewalk for you. I have seen people scoring that in the first mock even without preparing as well. But yeah, I would say somewhere around about this much time would be required still. Generally, if you're exceptional, you should definitely be targeting 750 plus. We had a couple of students, many students actually in this bracket. So one story that I would share with you is of Ritvik. You guys can check that out. He scored a 760 in his first attempt with an effective preparation time of about 1.5 months only. So that is approximately an idea of how much time you might take to kind of go ahead and actually go about like your prep. Now I have questions coming in. Yogesh says, who are extremely weak, or what about those? So basically, when you talk about extremely weak, again, those are subjective terms. But again, generally, when you are a weak student academically, you have not been very bright, or let's say, and I'm not saying that academic brightness is equivalent to GMAT. Myself, I never scored 100 ever on my quant or my maths in school, like not in my 10th board, not in my 12th board. The highest I scored was about like I think 88 and 92, something like that, in the two boards respectively. But I was able to score a Q50 in a very quick amount of time, because GMAT is slightly different. It's a lot more logical. So all these things which I'm telling you is from a logical perspective. If you're a very logical person, like exceptionally logical, then keep yourself in that bracket. So if you're very weak, again, it is very difficult for me to qualify exactly what is the degree of weakness you're talking about over here, but it can take you something around this much time to get to this level, and about I would say 300 to 400 hours to get to this level. And if you're even weaker than this, it might take you even longer. So we have like we have had cases where people came to us with a 460 on the GMAT as well, and they were able to get to a 700 plus with about this much of effort. So if you want to check out one such example, I can just share that example as well with you, about Maya. So basically, this is just an approximate idea about how much time you would require. And overall, there are certain assumptions that I'm making over here. My assumption number one is that you are working with a personalized study plan. You are always starting in the right direction. And the second assumption which I'm making over here is that you are consistently studying. It is not like you're taking breaks between your studies and you're actually coming back to the studies again and again. So these are certain assumptions that I have taken over here. I hope this is clear to you guys. Any question till this point? Please let me know if you have any questions till this point. I'll be more than happy to take that up. And with that, I am gonna move to how the GMAT scoring works. So again, it's very different from most of the other tests. So I'll talk about this, but I'll just quickly take up the questions. Steen says, how about someone who is prepared for CAT, how much hours it takes? So if you're prepared for CAT, then your quant prep time will reduce to half, I would say, generally. If you're really good in verbal in CAT as well, it depends like what stage of what exactly was your CAT score and other things. So, but if you're very good in verbal as well, your preparation time in verbal could also reduce to, let's say, 60-70%. That depends as well on how good you are. So you have to look at all those factors as well when you are actually planning. Any other questions on that, let me know in the chat. I'll be happy to take them up, only if it is not like a lot different from what we are discussing right now. But in the meantime, for a quick, let's quickly get into how the GMAT scoring works. So generally what happens is, when you look at traditional tests, the funda is very simple. You have 30 questions in the test. Let's say 3 marks are assigned to each of these questions. you have total marks as 90, and let's say you get 20, you mark 20 questions and you get all those correct, your score is 60 out of 90. So you know that you have scored a 66%. Right? You know that. And then in some cases, you might be assigned a percentile. That's how most of the tests work. So generally what happens is when people start thinking about GMAT, they also think that, okay, I have to focus on a high accuracy. But is that what GMAT really is? Not really. GMAT is a very different test because it does not focus solely on accuracy. And I want that you to understand this through some data points. I'm going to make this easy for you. But if you guys have any questions at any point of time, feel free to interrupt me and ask those questions that you get. Okay. So over here, what I'm showing you is the GMAT scorecard that I had for my verbal section. So you can see I scored a verbal 41. This are like score out of 60, they say, but the highest they ever give is 51 anyway. But yeah, so this is my verbal score. Basically, this is equivalent to roughly, I would say, I think 93 or 94 percentile. So that's what it is equivalent to basically. And what you can see over here is the trend chart. How many questions did I get correct in each quarter? So overall in the entire test, I made total of 7 mistakes. Basically, a total of 7 mistakes were made by me in the entire test. That is what you need to understand, guys. Okay. So 7 mistakes and I scored a verbal 41. So this is what you can see: 7 mistakes and a verbal score of 41. Now let's look at another ESR over here. This student, on the other hand, has made a total of only 5 mistakes. Okay, just 5 mistakes. Generally, I ask people to guess the score, the verbal score of this student. But most people will think if GMAT would have worked like any other test where linear scoring worked, as in you get a question right, you have higher accuracy, you get better, higher scores, then you would probably expect this student to perform better than the first one. That the student will have a higher score than a 41. But just to give you an idea, guys, this student actually scored just a verbal 34. That's like 7 points less than me, even after having a better accuracy. That's how different the GMAT algorithm is. It is an adaptive test. Now, in simplest possible way, again, if you want to understand in depth about the adaptive algorithm, I would request my team to kind of share with you another webinar that I have conducted on that topic. In that, I have covered every single aspect that you can think about the algorithm in details. Okay, but in case you want to like check that out, you can check this webinar out later on whenever you want to. But for now, I'm gonna basically focus on very small, simple things. So in simple ways, the algorithm works in adaptive fashion, where it first checks your accuracy in a set of questions which are handed over to you. Generally, you start at the medium difficulty level, and in a bucket of 3-4 questions, if your accuracy is, let's say, upwards of 75%, your difficulty level is increased to the next difficulty level, which is medium hard. And if you get those questions right as well, then the difficulty level goes up further to hard. But in case your accuracy is poor, less than 50%, your difficulty level is brought down to easy medium. And if your accuracy is still poor, it will be brought down to even easy questions further. So that's a very easy way to understand how the algorithm works. So it depends on how you perform in the various quarters. Basically, your score will actually depend on that. So and the result is evident on your screen. You can see, and if you look at this 7 points, then you should again consider it twice, because this 7 points, that's a difference of about 22 percentile in the overall score. So if you, let's say, get a quant 50 with this one, okay, you end up getting a 740 or 750 on the GMAT. Over here, if you get a quant 50 with a verbal 34, you only get a 680 or 690 on the GMAT. So that's about 50 points of difference, right? And that would be the difference between getting an admit from the school and not getting an admit for the school. Getting a scholarship and not getting a scholarship. And yeah, I did not cover the aspect of scholarship. So if you want to get a scholarship, generally you should aim about 20-30 points higher than the numbers that I showed you earlier on the previous slides. So basically, this is the kind of difference that we are talking about over here. Okay, so very, very important that you understand this well overall. Now, what does this mean? In GMAT, accuracy is not the key metric. Skill is the key metric. It is important to focus on the questions that you are getting correct. So in GMAT, if you want to score high, you have to get the harder questions right consistently. That is the more important thing. You cannot get high score on GMAT by actually just getting the easy and medium questions right. And that's very, very important for you guys to understand. Because if you don't understand this, you will have a big time actually, like a difficult time in actually getting a good score on GMAT. Because in GMAT, unlike, for example, let's say a lot of people who are from India prepare for CAT before taking the GMAT. And CAT is another, it's a very, very tough test, definitely. But still, if you want to ace the test, like I have scored a 99.9 percentile basically in CAT, which basically puts me in the top 0.1% of the country. But even then, like my recommendation to students was that if you just want to enter the 99 percentile bucket, all you have to do is select all the easy and medium questions from the paper and get them right. All of that. That's all. You don't have to worry about any hard questions. Just skip all the hard questions, just do easy and medium questions and get those correct. But in GMAT, that doesn't work. You cannot skip questions. In fact, unless you get the hard questions right, you cannot score a high score on GMAT. So let me bring you to that. So what does a score of 700 plus signify? What it signifies is that you are getting a very high accuracy in easy and medium questions, very close to 90 to 100%. You don't have any scope for error over there. So this part of it is similar to CAT. Yeah, you have to get the questions which are easy and medium correct. But what then? The second stage becomes very important as well. The moment you get to the hard questions, you have to get at least 50 to 60% of them correct just to break the 700 barrier. Just to break the 700 barrier, guys. Understand it this way. And at GMATWhiz, when we work with students, we always focus on this aspect that from day one itself, you should be preparing yourself to tackle the hard questions if you're targeting a 700 plus. Yeah, if your target is 600, 650, and again, there are people who don't need to target a 700 plus. That's like a common thing in the industry that people think, okay, 700 plus is very important. No, if you're from the right geography, if you're from an underrepresented pool, or you have done great things in your career, schools will even take you with the 600, 650. In fact, I know a student who we worked with, to whom Harvard and Wharton were ready to even consider at a 550. His profile was that great. So it is not always about high GMAT scores. But if your profile is not very different, or you're from an overrepresented pool, like a general IT engineer made from India or even China, let's say, you do need a high score on GMAT. And if you require that kind of a high score, you definitely need to get the hard questions right. And you should prepare in a fashion that you get the hard questions right from the day one itself. As in, not hard questions right from the day one, but you prepare yourself in a way that you are going in that right direction at least. All right, so that is something which is very important. Let me help you understand how the scoring works. So you might think, okay, Piyush, you told us that, okay, 5 questions wrong, you got a verbal that someone got a verbal 34, with 7 mistakes, you got a verbal 41. So how does the scoring really work in that case? So how the scoring works is, I'm just trying to show you an example over here. So if someone is scoring verbal 40 plus, generally, and this is something which I've analyzed from a lot of score reports that I've seen of students analyzed over a long period of time, the number of medium hard questions that they are getting right is significantly high. And medium hard question is, in another language, you can call it as 700 plus level questions. Okay. Now look at the number of medium hard questions. The students who are getting the scores in this range are getting. Again, you can see the scores over here. You look at the number of medium hard questions that these students are getting correct. If you look at the combined number of questions correct, it will be almost similar for all these categories, almost very close. But if you look at the number of medium hard questions these other students are getting correct, this is definitely lower. Now look at the mid 30 range. The medium hard questions, number of medium hard questions these students get correct is even lower. And when you look at the verbal 30 range, basically this is almost negligible. So it gives you an idea that how the GMAT scoring really works. It's a little complex, but if you look at it in simple terms, it is all about, first of all, making sure that the algorithm gives you hard questions, like by getting the easy and medium ones correct, and then making sure that you get those questions right. Now, what impact does it have on your GMAT prep? Now, why am I talking about all this? Why is GMAT scoring important for the GMAT prep? So slowly and steady, now I'm going to transition to the GMAT prep part of it, and I'm going to focus on that. Now, why is this important? Because what happens generally is when people start preparing for the GMAT, and just like any other competitive test that they have prepared for, they start focusing on shortcuts. I do remember my CAT days. When I was preparing for CAT, I learned so many different shortcuts. In fact, there were many cases in which I created shortcuts of my own, which no one else taught me. I created shortcuts for specific cases, that in this case, this will work, in that case, that will work. Because as I said, in CAT, the first thing that I have to do is select all the easy and medium questions and get them right. Even without doing any hard question, I can still get a 99% right. So this getting easy and medium questions right in less time is very, very critical. In GMAT, on the other hand, what is more critical is basically getting the hard questions right. Now, shortcuts will not work on GMAT. Now, you might think, why? Why so? Because understand it this way, guys, shortcuts will only work on easy and medium questions. They will not work on hard ones. Okay? Now, why is this important? Many of you may not be able to relate to this now, but remember this session, remember me, you might have, I don't want you to be in that situation, but you might be in a situation where you recollect all these things which I told you right now, that you started focusing on some popular shortcuts like splits approach in sentence correction or skimming through the information which is given in reading comprehension. Why am I talking about all this? Because I made these mistakes. When I was preparing for the GMAT, I started doing these, like following these approaches, did not work for me at all. Like it was a complete waste of my time. I spent about 6 months wasted completely on these methods, but not working at all. Because these methods will only get you across the easy and medium questions. They will not work on the hard questions. And let me tell you why. Let's take a simple example. Many people use falsifying method for assumption questions. Now that's a shortcut. Even if you just quickly read the argument and you know what is the conclusion, and if you just falsify each of the answer choices, in that case, and you see which one of these is breaking the conclusion, you can mark the answers quickly. But it will work well on easy and medium questions. It won't work on hard questions. Let me tell you why. First reason, in easy and medium questions, you can eliminate 2-3 choices, in fact 4 choices in most cases, very easily. So falsification is something which can either help you in confirming the answer very quickly, so you just falsify that one option or 2 options that you are worried about. You just end up falsifying those 2, and it doesn't take you extra time to get them right. And you start feeling that, okay, this is the best way to go about solving CR questions. I should be falsifying all the assumptions, and that will work for me. But no, that is not the right approach for hard questions. Why? Because in hard questions, when you have very close choices, it's not easy to eliminate. You might be able to eliminate 1 or 2, but there would be 3 or 4 choices which are close. Not very close, but they are close. So if you end up falsifying each one of those, you end up consuming more than 3 minutes on solving a question, which is not the right thing to do. And when you end up taking the extra minutes for solving the question, in many cases, people give up, people lose focus, people lose concentration, either get that particular question itself wrong, or they're left with less time for the upcoming further questions, and then they end up messing up on those. So very important, guys, that you plan your prep right. From day one, what I want you to note down is from day one, you should focus on getting a high accuracy on hard questions, as in at least getting on that right track. I'm not saying from day one you will get a high accuracy on hard questions, but your track should be the same. You should prepare with that mindset. That mindset is important. Okay, Sunny has a question. Please do suggest study material sources for building a strong foundation targeting 750 plus. That's what I'm doing, Sunny. Please be with me. I'm just building the entire narrative, helping you understand the kind of mindset that you need to develop. I hope all of this is making sense for you guys, by the way, right? You are able to relate to all this. Some of you who have prepared would have a better understanding. Some of you are new. Please make sure that right now, some of it might be very fresh for you, but as you go forward in your journey, you will realize the importance of all these things. But let's move forward. So, understand it, guys. Right now, what is very important is to have a plan of action. Because if you have an MBA goal and you don't have a plan, then it is still a wish. You need to take it more seriously. And especially for a test like GMAT, the plan plays a very, very significant role. Now, let's get to the planning part. So let's understand that. Thank you so much, KK, for saying yes. I'm happy that at least I'm able to sync my thoughts with you and you're able to understand what I'm talking about over here. So let's move to the phases of learning. So in GMAT, what we recommend at GMATWhiz is that you should focus on 3 phases of learning. Overall, your entire preparation should be divided into broadly 3 phases. And this is something which is very critical. Many people actually do not understand either about like these 3 stages, or they do not focus on basically the 3 stages in the right fashion, like in the right order. So first stage of learning basically is the learning phase, okay, where you kind of understand the various nitty-gritties of GMAT. What are the various things that are tested on the GMAT? You expose yourself to all the concepts, and not just the concepts, you learn how to apply those concepts on different type of questions that come on GMAT. And trust me guys, many people make this mistake. They try to rush through this learning phase very quickly. In fact, the entire prep time that they spend, they only spend about 30 to 40% of their prep time on the learning phase, which basically leads to multiple problems. But in reality, what I've seen with students who do extremely well on the GMAT, people who succeed well on the GMAT, when we interview them, what we hear from them is that about 70 to 80% of their effort was actually spent on the learning phase. They end up doing this part very, very well. Because if you do things right here, then you don't need to spend a lot of time in the next stage, which is the fine-tuning stage. And don't worry, I'm going to cover every single stage in depth with you guys and help you understand all of that. Now, what is the fine-tuning stage? At a very high level, fine-tuning is about that now you have a very good understanding of all that is tested on the GMAT. Now you are focusing on your weaknesses. Now you're converting your weaknesses into your strengths. That's what you focus on. Now, people who basically take a long time to actually prepare for the GMAT, they end up spending about 50% of their effort over here. And trust me guys, this is a never ending loop. They go from this to that to this, and it takes a lot of time and effort. And in many cases, people even give up. And people who are preparing for in the right way, they generally spend about 10 to 15% of their effort in this phase. So these are people who prepare in the optimal amount of time, and these are people who take 2x to 3x the time required to prepare for the GMAT. Okay, so it's very critical that you do the first stage well. I'll talk about the fine-tuning stage as well, that how you do it, and I'll talk about all these stages in at a different stage, as a part of this session today. So what about the mock stage? Now again, this stage is where people spend about 20% of their time, and this one and the people who take extra time to prepare, they confuse these two stages. In most cases, they mixed up these two stages completely. There's no clear demarcation between the two. But if you prepare right, this stage should ideally only take you about 10% of your effort. In fact, in many cases, I've seen people only spending 5 to 10% of their entire effort on this stage. For GMAT mocks, only 4 to 5 marks are sufficient for the GMAT. And again, I'll come to that. So let's get going with the learning stage first. Let's understand what should be your sequence of studying. So now let's talk about individual sections first. So let's talk about verbal. And for understanding what is the sequence of studying in verbal, we need to understand what are the skills that are tested in verbal. Now, many people don't understand this well enough. As in, for example, let's say I hear people coming to me and saying that, okay, Piyush, I think I took a mock test for the GMAT, or I just took the OG and started solving some questions. RC is one area which seemed very, very complex to me. So I've started working on my GMAT on my own, starting with reading comprehension. Is that the right thing to do? Some people even come to me and tell me, okay, on Mondays I do sentence correction, on Tuesday I do CR, and on Wednesdays I do RC, and then I repeat that cycle. So basically, that is a common misconception which is there in people's mind. People do not understand the skills that are tested. So what I'm going to first help you understand is what are the skills that are tested on the GMAT. And then from there, I'm pretty sure that you will be able to tell me yourself what is the right learning sequence. So the first skill which is tested on GMAT is comprehension, because as a manager you have to comprehend clearly in an unambiguous fashion with your peers, with everyone around you. So how closely are you able to comprehend complex language as well in English, not just basic English, even complex English? How clearly are you able to comprehend it? Not 70-80%, but 100%. And second skill which is tested is analytical reasoning. If there is an information which is provided to you, can you identify the assumptions in that information? Can you identify the gaps? Can you identify whether a certain conclusion can be reached? Because you have to take decisions as a business manager later on. And then you're also tested on focus on main point, because you will be going through a lot of case studies during your MBA and post MBA as well in your career. So can you focus on the main point? Can you remove the clutter in the case study and focus on the main idea of the case study? Can you identify the gist of the entire things that you need? And these three things is what GMAT is trying to test through the verbal section. Now, let me try and map these three to the three sections on the GMAT. So if you look at sentence correction doesn't require you to be working on analytical reasoning or focus on main point, because there's just one sentence that you have to focus on. You definitely have to learn grammar, but you have to learn grammar more from a comprehension or a meaning based perspective. So SC necessarily is testing you on only one skill, that is comprehension skill, because there's just one sentence to comprehend. But if you look at critical reasoning, you have to work on comprehension as well as analytical reasoning, because there are multiple sentences that are out there. There is an argument that is there. So you don't have to just understand individual sentences. You have to relate the meaning of one sentence to another and kind of understand if all of it is making sense or not. So very important that you have to build the analytical reasoning skill. Then in RC, you don't have to just go through comprehension and analytical reasoning. You have to focus on the gaps, but you also have to focus on the main idea of the passage. What is the author really trying to communicate? So if you look at these three topics and you look at these three skills, can you guys now tell me what is the right learning sequence according to you for the GMAT preparation? Can you guys tell me what is the right learning sequence? What could be the right learning sequence for you guys? Let's see from you. I've been talking for a long time. Let me get a sip of water, and I would love to see your thoughts here on this, guys. So what do you think is the right learning sequence in this case? Let me see some comments from you. It has been a monotonous, like I'm just going in, talking. Let's hear from you guys now. Let's see if you're able to come up with the right sequence. Okay, I have some comments coming in. Sunny and Sanjay says SC, CR, RC in that order. Okay, focus main point first is what KK says. Why KK? Why do you think so? Why do you think focusing on main point makes more sense? RC then CR then SC is the approach KK is saying. Pihu says SC then CR then RC. Okay, what about others, guys? I see about 50 of you in the session right now. And I just see 4 comments. Like it would be really encouraging if others can also pitch in with their thoughts. Okay, Purnima says, I also go with RC, then CR, then SC. What about others? Then let me explain this, guys. I don't want you to buy my recommendation over here. I just want you to understand how the GMAT works and then understand why what I'm saying makes more sense. Okay, if it makes more sense to you. So let's see a few more comments coming in, guys. Please feel free to participate. It motivates me to even give more and more to you and contribute in a better way. So do let me know what your thoughts are. Okay, Anas also says RC then SC, CR then SC. LinkedIn user doesn't have his name mentioned over here, but SC then CR then RC, what to say. So most of you are going for SC then CR then RC. Some of you are going the other way now. At least no one else is going in a different way that, okay, let's do all of this together or let's do CR first. But let's understand and break this down, guys. Imagine that if you start working on RC, then what you have to do is you have to work on all 3 skills at the same time. Now, God forbid you don't end up doing well. God forbid you don't end up doing well. Then what happens is you're not really sure. You're not really sure which skill are you lacking. You're not really sure which skill are you lacking. So if you're not sure which skill are you lacking, you don't know where to focus. It will become very difficult for you to do that. But if you start with sentence correction, you just have to focus on building one skill at a time, which is comprehension skills. And once you get a high score in comprehension, you are very sure that you are ready to move to the second stage, which is critical reasoning. And when you move to critical reasoning, the best part about it is not just that you are working on critical reasoning. The best part is you are sure that your comprehension skills are in place. So you just have to work on analytical reasoning and build that skill. And if you build that skill and then you move to RC, then you are focusing on just the main point. That's the last skill that you have to focus on. So what you are doing is you're making your life easy by focusing on just one skill at a time. That's the best way, in my opinion, to go about preparing. Nakul has a point. Nakul says, go with the topic in which you are confident. Now, Nakul, that is something which is true for people who have done some bit of their prep already. And also for people who are looking at a very tight deadline. But generally, what I recommend is if you have time on hand, as in you're not looking at a deadline in the next 1 month or 2 months for the GMAT preparation or taking your test, it is better to follow the sequence. Even if you are more confident in CR, for example, it makes sense to start with SC. The reason for that is simple. If at all, because of your, let's say, lack in comprehension skills, if you're not doing well in CR, the moment you complete SC, you will actually see a bump in your CR score. In fact, when I started focusing on the right skills and started learning in the right order, I did not have to spend much of my time on RC, hardly any time on RC I had to spend, and I was able to improve my score significantly by just working on SC and CR. And I will share one more case with you. I had a student very recently who was able to improve his score on GMAT from 670 to 740 in just 20 days, guys. Okay, he's a working professional. He was a working professional back then, and now also he's a working professional, by the way. But in 20 days, he was able to improve the score. And when he came to us, he said, "Okay, I'm very comfortable with sentence correction. I don't think I need to work on that. I need to work on CR and RC." But when we started working with him, we felt that he has scope for improvement in SC, not to improve only his SC score, but to improve his CR and RC scores as well, because comprehension skill is what is tested in the other two areas as well. He was doing good in SC because of his grammar understanding, but his comprehension was not perfect back then. And when he worked with us in this 20 days, you won't believe me, about 16 to 17 days he spent only on SC and CR. He just had to work 2-3 days on RC, and he was able to get that kind of improvement. If you want to check out his story, I've shared the link in the chat. You guys can check it out later on if you want to. But this is the best learning sequence that works. All right, guys. Any questions on this? Feel free to put it in the chat. Now, with that, let's move on to quant. For quant, again, the best way to go about it is do the basic concepts first, then intermediate, then advanced concepts. Because in quant, honestly, there are a lot of skills which are tested. Picturization, for example, utilizing constraints. Can you consider cases properly? Logical inferences, and there are multiple skills which are tested. About 6-7 of them are tested, and they are mapped very closely to almost all sections like word problems, number properties, and algebra and geometry. So what we don't recommend following a specific order in the modules, like doing word problems first and geometry then. Not like that, because in quant everything is going to be intermixed. So it is more important that you do the basic topics first. So what I'm going to show you now is the list of topics that you should go through when you want to prepare for quant. So this is the list, and you should prepare for it in this order. Now, how is this list prepared? It is prepared keeping in mind progressive learning architecture. What I mean by that is that at GMATWhiz, we did extensive research to identify which topics would require you to know which other topics. For example, if you're doing prime numbers, you should know the concept of even odd numbers before doing prime numbers. So you should go through even odd numbers before doing primes. Similarly, if you are doing prime numbers, you would need to know how to work with exponents, because in prime factorization, you will have exponents to deal with. So you should know how exponents work. Similarly, you should also know how linear equations are solved, because you might as well come across a linear equation that you have to solve while you're solving a prime number related questions. And even before that, you need to know the basics of numbers. What is a natural number? What is a whole number? What is a prime number? What is an integer, in fact? So you need to do all these things before coming to prime. And when you do primes, then you can move on to LCM GCD. And similarly, when you do primes, then also you can move on to topics like divisibility and remainders and many other things. So this sequence that you see takes into account the interdependency between all the modules of quant, number properties, algebra, word problems, geometry for that matter, all the modules of quant, and gives you the perfect sequence of learning. So if you want, obviously you don't have time to note it down, you can take a screenshot of this, or you can refer to this video later on. And I'm also going to give you a very easy way to kind of understand where you can get this list later on, in case you don't find it, like you don't keep it with you now. So what is now very important is that now you have understood the sequence of learning. Very important that you create an action plan out of it for your learning phase. Very important. Now for that, and as I said, the prep time could be anywhere between 100 to 400 hours. You have to take into account your strengths and weaknesses in these areas. It is possible that you are going to be better at quant than in verbal, or the other way around, or you could be weak in number properties specifically, or geometry. So it is important that you give the right amount of time to those specific areas. Then you should also take into account how much time is available with you. You should not just take a plan on the internet which gives you a 4-month plan for GMAT, assuming that you will be studying for like 25 hours in a week or 30 hours in a week. And most likely they will not even mention how many hours a week of study is required. You have to create a plan based on your time availability, because if you don't do that, you will not be able to match with the base. And once you start falling behind the schedule, you start losing motivation, and you might as well give up on your studies. And then Again, when round one comes near, you will start thinking about the GMAT, and that happens every year. Trust me, guys. More than 50% people, they start thinking about the GMAT in Jan. They are not able to work on it for whatever reasons. One of these reasons I already told you, and then they come around back to us around round one saying that okay, now I want to work on it, and it's too late by then. They might have to apply in round two in most cases. So please make sure that you're taking a plan of action, creating a plan of action using the time that is available with you. And then you're also focusing on the right sequence of learning. So create the sequence, follow the sequence that I mentioned. And a part of it also I'm going to talk about very soon now. And also you need to understand how much content do you need to study. So these two parts I'm going to talk about a little more now. But let's say you're confused right now that how do I get a plan which can help me build all this. So don't worry about this. I'm going to give you a very free study plan engine. You can actually go to GMATWhiz.com, which is our website, and create a free trial account. And what it will do for you is it will actually ask you some very simple questions to kind of understand what your current skill level is. For example, it will ask you what is your target GMAT score. It will ask you if you have already taken a mock test or something. You can mention your score over there, and then it will ask you if you have sectional scores. If you know your quant and global scores already, do mention it over here. It will take that into account while creating your plan. And if you know any further details about the SCCR and RC performance, do mention all of that, or just mention you don't have your module by score. And again, then mention the how much time can you study per week. So a personalized study plan will be created for you free of charge. We don't take any money for you, not even a credit card information for this. And automatically the AI starts personalizing your study plan. As you can see, it classifies all the buckets. It tells you exactly how much time you would require for doing exactly which activity. It is right now creating a sequence of learning for you, and all of it at the back end is also working on individual items that you need to go through. It calculates the time that you need to take on each activity based on the effort that you wanted to put in, and it also identifies exactly which activities do you need to go through. And the moment you click on the next button, it will actually take you to the actual activities that you need to do. So we don't just say, okay, you have to study like 25 hours or 30 hours, a particular topic or 25 days. We tell you exactly what you need to do in the current week. And there's a proper target which is assigned to you. 13 videos to watch, 12 quizzes to take. You click on the start button and you get started with this. So it's a completely integrated experience. In the free trial, you will get the free study plan created for you. And you will also have access to few learning modules as well, free of charge. This is completely free of charge for you. If you want to access other modules of our course as well, you can upgrade your account and pay for it and get it. But for the study plan, we are not charging you anything, and you're getting some content as well. And when you upgrade your account as well, if you choose to upgrade your account, you will get the entire course plan created for you, all the modules that you need to go through. So no more thinking about, okay, what do I do today? What do I do the next day? Just log into your portal, click on the start button, and it gets started. And all of this is dynamic, by the way, guys. It is not going to be static. You can actually change your study plan every single week. It changes. You can go to the calendar view, see the entire plan being laid out for you, and every activity that you see over here can actually get personalized based on how you're performing. So it's possible that right now these 6 activities are being shown. The plan can actually change these activities to just 2, 3, or even increase it to 10 or 15, depending on how you perform in various quizzes and so on. So if you want to try it out, I'll definitely give you a link. I'll request my team to actually share the link with you guys, and you can actually understand it better from the link overall. But yeah, coming to the next stage. So I told you how to create a study plan, but now it is very important for you to understand how should you go about individual topics. So we talked about sentence correction, we talked about CR, then RC. But there are so many topics between each in CR, SC, and RC. How do you tackle each one of those? So what is very important is that you should focus on the 3 learning stages. For each topic, you should have these 3 learning stages. So let me talk about those now. But let me take up a question from the chat here. Intelligent investor says, I'm extremely confused between eGMAT and GMATWhiz. I find both good but can't decide on one. So you can reach out to me. I can help you understand the differences from my standpoint. But generally, what I always recommend to students is that you should try the free trial of both and understand which relates to you better. You can understand the differences from it easily, but in case you want our help to understand the differences, I can definitely help you out with that. All right, so let's move to the 3 stages of learning now. So first step of learning, whenever you are learning a particular topic, let's say you're taking up prime numbers. So this is just an example, guys. I'm just showing you that you have to first start with learning all the concepts related to it. So for example, in prime numbers, there are concepts like total number of factors, there are concepts like how to find even factors, odd factors, and there are multiple other concepts. So you have to first do concept building exercises for prime numbers. Similarly, if you're doing divisibility, you have to start with basic understanding of divisibility rules that exist. Just a snapshot I'm giving you. And trust me, guys, this is one stage which most people do well. They generally do a very good job when it comes to learning concepts. Now, where do they falter? The step where they falter is the second step. They generally don't even take the second step. They will move to the third step. Right after learning concepts, people generally move to the third step, which is practicing questions. They start thinking that, okay, now that I know all the concepts, for me, now it is the time to actually do more and more questions. The more questions I do, the better I become. And that's when starts like sometimes a vicious cycle, sometimes a virtuous cycle, depending on how talented you are. But in most cases, people end up being in a loop where they end up repeating things multiple times, concepts and all. They start thinking if they get a good poor score, that their conceptual knowledge is bad. They repeat it, still their scores don't improve. So the second step is very critical, and it is even more critical for people who are looking at like getting the hard questions right or getting a 700 plus score. So please be focused on this part. Right after you learn concepts, step 2, learn all variations in which that concept can be tested on the GMAT. Very important, guys. And along with that, learn the methods that you should use to solve those questions. So ideally, for all those variations that are there, the method that you use should remain the same. The major part of the method should remain the same. There will be slight tweaks which will be required in each one of those variations conceptually, which you should learn how to apply. And this is a big mistake which people do. They will do like they'll take a topic like, let's say, divisibility, and they will solve 100 questions on divisibility. But on, let's say, in GMAT, there are 10 ways in which divisibility is tested. They will focus on 7 of them or 6 of them and do all 100 questions from those. But you're better off doing 50 questions on divisibility where you give equal importance to all the variations. In fact, more importance to the more difficult ones. And that's one big problem that we feel exists that people don't do. So please make sure that you do this. Let's take an example. For example, you learn this concept. A number is equal to quotient multiplied by divisor plus remainder. Again, I'm not teaching you today, so I'm not going to focus a lot on this. But overall, just try to get a basic sense of it. This is a common equation that exists. Number is equal to QD plus R. We call it Q plus R in general lingo. Now, there's a question type which comes on GMAT, which says if a number which is in the format, they won't say in the format QD plus R, but they will give you information where you can represent it in this format. And then they say if the same number is divided by another number, find the remainder. So the question could be as simple as this. If, let's say, a number is divided by 12, it gives a remainder 5. What is the remainder when the number is divided by 6? So many people just stop at this level that, okay, n is equal to QD plus R. But what you need to understand is try to focus on rather Q into D1 plus R is divided by D2. Let's call the two divisors separately, call out the two divisors separately, D1 and D2. So there could be one variation on the GMAT, very simple variation, where you have D2 as a factor of D1. Again, I don't want to go conceptually too much into this, but I'm just trying to help you understand what do I mean by various variations. So let's say D2 is a factor of D1. For example, what if 12Q plus 5 is divided by 6? This is one variation, an easy one, although it's a very easy variation, but you need, some people just learn these variations. But then there is another variation to this, that okay, D2 is still a factor of D1, but in this case, the remainder is bigger than the divisor 2. That's a slightly different variation. People are still prepared for this. Then there is another variation. What if D2 is a multiple of D1 instead of being a factor? You can have 6Q plus 5 divided by 12. Are you prepared to tackle that? There could be a different example, different use case possible altogether in this case. Variation 4 could be D2 and D1 have nothing in common altogether. So what I'm trying to tell you over here is that in a particular topic, there could be 10 different ways in which GMAT could be testing you on all of this. It is possible that you could have very, very different ways in which GMAT is testing you on all of these. And if you are not prepared to tackle all those type of questions, or there's a high likelihood that on the mock test or when you're actually towards the fag end of your prep, you'll come across a new question type, a new variation type which you are not prepared for, and you will end up struggling. So what is very important is when you are learning concepts, right after learning concepts, you should expose yourself to all these variations that exist in a topic. And for that very specific reason, at GMATWhiz, we have developed this concept booster file. So these are like very uniquely designed files, a very unique concept that we came up with, where what we did was we started looking at different type of topics. And I recommend people who want to do this research themselves, they can do it. But if you have less time, you can utilize our research to actually speed up your learning process. But generally, what we did was we looked at all official questions which are there on divisibility and remainders. Let's say I'm just taking one topic. We looked at every topic like that, and we looked at all questions. Let's say there were 200 questions that were there. Then we classified each one of them into a certain variation that existed. And then what we did was we created this concept booster file where we give you one question from each variety to solve. Even there is a few concept boosters file in our free trial as well. You can check them out. So you solve only one question at a time, and right after solving the question, you get to see the solution of the question in a very step-by-step fashion. You're able to see what should be your line of reasoning, where are the traps that GMAT sets for in this variation, because in each variation, the common thing is GMAT will set a particular trap, and you need to be very careful about the trap. So we teach you what are the steps, what are the traps that are there. So when you go through the solution right after solving the question, the benefit that you get is not just you are getting prepared for that variation, you also get to learn the right method. And when you learn the right method and you apply that on the next question, you are able to improve from it. So you figure out the gaps in your process, your application, or let's call it the process. And then when you apply it on the next question, you are able to iteratively learn from the second question and the third question and so on. And as I said, in each concept booster, all questions are handpicked and it covers a very different aspect of the same topic that is being tested. So we will do that for every single topic. For example, in the free trial, you will get to see this prime numbers free trial, in which you can see these are the video lessons that teach you the concepts. And then right after that, you have these concept boosters to teach you the process for solving questions and the various variations of all type of questions that exist. And after that, there's a practice quiz. I'll come to that later. But overall, the second step of learning always has to be the varieties of questions that are there. You should expose to them. And second thing which I said, if you remember, was not just exposing yourself to the right varieties, it is also very important that you validate your method, because the two objectives that are trying to achieve to the second step. Number one, preparedness for all type of questions. Number two, making sure that you use the right method. Now, why is the right method important? I told you a little while back, guys. If you don't use the right methods, you'll not be able to get the hard questions right. That's number one reason. Number two reason, if you don't use the right method, you will not be able to basically have the right timing. Many people come to me and say that, Piyush, my only problem in GMAT is I'm not able to solve questions on time. If all I had was more time to take the test, I would have done better. But that's an excuse, guys. You cannot get more time from the GMAT. You cannot get more time than what is there for everyone. So what we need to understand is, why are you taking extra time? And take related to your professional life. Let's say you're a coder. Okay, let's say you're a coder. Why would you take extra time to code something? You will only take extra time to code something if you don't create an algorithm for it first. If you don't write down the logic on paper and you start coding directly, or your method of that entire algorithm is flawed. You have not taken into account all the cases and all of that. So what I'm trying to say is that even in your professional life, if you don't follow the right method, your timing will never be perfect. And understand it this way, guys. It has to be the right method, not a shortcut. Second thing that you need to understand, whenever you're perfecting the right method, it will never happen that on day one itself, you will start doing things in the optimal time. You will not be able to solve a question in 2 minutes because you're still learning the method. And once you ingrain the method initially, you will be able to improve on the timing automatically. That is something which will automatically happen. So very important is to validate the method. So I'm going to focus a little on how to validate the method in step 2 for every single topic. All right, guys. So let's understand that. So let's say you've solved this question. Again, this is a critical reasoning question, which is asking something. Again, I'm not right now interested in solving the question because just one question is not going to make you go any further. But if you are interested in the answer, I guess the answer is option B. But as I said, we are not interested in the question right now. What is that we're interested in? Understanding how to evaluate and validate our methods. So let's say you solve this question and then you see the solution. And again, this is the GMATWhiz solution that is there for this question. So what we do always is we try to help students understand that what should be a line of reasoning when you're reading something. So for example, what you should ask yourself is that when I read the first sentence, just the first sentence in the argument, what is that I understood from it? That is what I mean by method. Method, for example, like I'll tell you more about this method basically that I'm talking about in depth as we move forward. So this is something called pre-thinking that we recommend students to follow. And pre-thinking doesn't mean pre-thinking the answer. Pre-thinking basically means that you analyze the argument stem, you identify the gaps in the information which is provided as you move forward. You don't do that after reading the question. You do that while reading the argument, every single sentence. So what we do is we teach you that method first, and when we want you to understand and apply that method. So in order to help you apply that, we tell you that, okay, when you read this first piece of information, what is that you should have understood from it? These are the this is the line of reasoning that you should have come up to. So if, let's say, when you review the solution, you find that, okay, when I read, you need to ask yourself that when I read the first line, did I understand it in the same fashion? Did I come to this conclusion or not? And if you did not come to this conclusion, there is an important lesson for you. You need to improve on that. Similarly, you will ask yourself that when I read the second sentence, did I come to this conclusion or not? And if you're not doing this and you're still getting to the right answer, understand it, guys, there are still mistakes that are happening. You might not realize it now, but later on it will create more trouble for you when you move forward. So important that you work on it right now. Similarly, you look at the third sentence, ask yourself, did I come up with this inference, and so on. So this is how you analyze the solutions. All right, guys. And only after that, once you have analyzed the solutions, you should then move to the third stage, which is to practice questions and identify the gaps. So you should ensure that now that you have actually understood all the topics, all the methods as well, for that particular question, you have exposed yourself to all the variations. Now you should take a topic-wise quiz. Take a topic quiz. Maybe take 10 questions, 15 questions on that, and identify whether you're strong enough on it. If you let's say getting 80% plus accuracy, at least getting the easy and medium ones right, then you are ready to move ahead. If you're not, then if you identify some weaknesses, focus on the weak parts right away. Because if you don't work on the weak parts, your issues will continue to pile up and you won't realize, but in the more advanced concepts, you will start facing issues. Okay, so let's put it into practice. So I'm just trying to help you understand how to do this for sentence correction. And remember the 3 steps, guys. For every topic, learn the concepts, then expose yourself to all variations and learn the right method, and then practice questions. These 3 steps have to be followed. But generally what people do is, I'm just trying to help you understand through an example. Generally when people learn sentence correction questions, what they do is they learn all the concepts, subject verb pairs, tenses, modifiers, pronouns individually. So when you learn subject verb pairs, you solve questions on those. And most likely you will get them right. Why? Because you've just learned the concept, so you know that the questions are going to test you on subject verb pairs. So you're categorically looking for that error. High chances you will get that right. But when you move to tenses, you'll probably again look for tense-related errors. You'll still get the questions right, and so on. But the moment when you actually get to the 700 level questions, you start getting them wrong. Why is that so? The reason for that is you have not developed habit of having a particular process irrespective of the topic that you are reading or solving. So if you don't develop a common approach, a common thought process or a method to solve questions, you will always end up being struggling in this particular category. That you will always end up getting stuck between 2 choices that, okay, basically this is the right answer, this is the wrong answer. You'll always be in that loop. So please make sure that when you're learning sentence correction, you always focus on the right method. In fact, for verbal, we recommend that for sentence correction, that overarching method, which is the meaning-based approach that we advocate, you should be focusing on that from day one, even before you go to the individual topics. So when you are learning sentence correction, for example, instead of learning all those rules individually, what you should be doing is that you should be focusing on meaning as the core entity. So try not to memorize the rules, because that's what most people do. That, okay, what is a reflexive pronoun or what is an emphatic pronoun? GMAT is not going to ask you that definition, right? What it is going to ask you is, how does it work? Logically, how does it work? You have to eliminate answer choices on a logical ground. So try to understand all those rules from a logic standpoint. Don't just read it like this, that, okay, a past perfect tense is supposed to be used when 2 past events exist. Not really. Past perfect tense may not be used even if there are 2 past events. You treat that as an exception. You might read it as an exception that, okay, even if there are 2 past events, There is an exceptional case in which it will not work. But you should not memorize them as rules. Try to focus on the meaning part of it. That why is that exceptional exist? Why is that exception existing in the first place? There is a logic behind it. Try to focus on that logic. Because if you don't know the logic, guys, what will happen with you is that the moment you forget that rule, and it is possible that you might forget the rule or you might not remember the rule. It's just like quant, right? You do not remember a formula. But if you don't know the logic, you are paralyzed. You will just be dependent on the rule. But if you know the logic, imagine in quant, you don't remember the rule for simple interest, a formula for simple interest, which is principal into rate into time by 100. Let's say you don't remember it. But if you know how simple interest works, you can still use unitary method and get the answer. That's what I'm trying to tell you. That in sentence correction also, when you are learning, focus on that meaning as the common thread of learning. And that is something which will help you on solving questions and getting them right. And that's why we always recommend that if you want to learn the sentence correction, in our coursework also, those of you who are GMAT students, you will see that about 7 to 8 hours of learning module. This unit 1 itself, SC Foundations, is entirely dedicated to this concept of understanding the intended meaning. That's where you start the thought process. Understand how to understand the intended meaning without focusing on grammar rules at all. And then what you should do is learn each and every topic that exists, all the grammar rules from a meaning standpoint. Because when you do that, you are able to get a very strong hold over the questions and you are able to get the questions right. And similarly for reading comprehension also, don't just jump into reading. I get a lot of questions around this. A lot of people ask me that, Piyush, which book should I read? Which newspaper should I read? My reading speed is slow. Even before doing that, guys, you need to start reading in the right fashion. So first thing that you should do in order to get a high accuracy in reading comprehension questions is to understand how to read. And you can see there is about 8 hours of learning module at GMAT, which is just dedicated to this part. And then only we go into individual areas of questions. So I want you to apply the same thought process when you are studying. All right, guys. Now, what are the light learning methods? So I talked about the meaning-driven approach for SC. Pre-thinking, and that we call it framework-driven pre-thinking, is basically what we use in our coursework. That is what you should do for CR. In RC, you should focus on involved and evolved reading. In DS, you should focus on drawing inferences before you move to option choices and the statements rather. And in PS, there's a 3-step process that we follow. So please make sure that you're learning the right methods every single time. With that, let's move to the fine-tuning stage. So this is about the learning stage. So I'm just doing a quick recall. In the learning stage, what I really mentioned was that you kind of have basically proper access to like the right sequence of learning. First of all, you have to ensure that you kind of dedicate your effort and time on sentence correction first, then critical reasoning, then RC in verbal. And for quant, I showed you what are the list of topics that we need to go through. And within each topic, you have 3 learning stages, as I told you. Okay. First one, concept building. Second, all the variations and the methods. Third, practice. Okay. And in case you're not good at it, you have to do more work on it. You have to improve on it and take your learning to the next level. Now, if you use GMATWhiz, you don't have to worry about the next stage. If you are not good, the GMATWhiz module will automatically recommend you improvement modules. Again, that is again another thing which is there. But always 3 stages for all the topics you have to do. Once all this is done, you enter the fine-tuning stage. Now, what to do in the fine-tuning stage? In the fine-tuning stage, you need to devote about, and I'm giving you a generalized idea right now. At GMATWhiz, we believe always in personalization. I'll tell you how we work on this on GMATWhiz as well. But in general, what I recommend is about 60 to 70% of your time should go specifically on your weak areas. You should have an error log where the weak area should be mentioned very, very clearly, ideally categorized into 3 buckets. Basically, first bucket is concept gaps, second bucket is application or let's say the process gaps, and the third bucket is basically timing gaps. So you have to identify, work on all 3 areas, basically give about 60 to 70% of your effort on these 3 areas solely, and divide the rest of the time on general revision and practice. On the other areas, even your strong areas, you should continue working so that you don't get weak on those. So the rest of the time should go on that. Now, how do you do this? So first, identify in which areas you have concept or application gaps. If you're not a GMATWhiz student, you can do this manually. You have to select the right set of questions also to do this. But in general, the rule of thumb says if your score accuracy is less than 60%, you have conceptual gaps in that. So you have to first learn the concepts and formulas again. Try to learn how to solve questions and then around solve 15 to 20 questions right away before you move forward to the next area. Make sure that you're confident and feel free to change these numbers unless you feel confident about your skills. All right. If your score is greater than 60 but less than 85, then you have application gaps in those. You don't need to go through the concepts again. You just have to learn how to solve questions methodically. So what is very important over here is to understand how to solve questions in a methodical or a step-by-step fashion. That is very critical for you to understand. So please make sure that you learn that by going through questions and more importantly the solutions of those questions properly, one step at a time, and then practice 10 to 15 questions. Generally that should be sufficient, but in case you don't feel comfortable, do a little more number of questions. But on every question that you solve, it is very critical that you actually focus on the solution of the questions. Please make sure that you go through the solutions properly, understand how they work, understand how each part of the like step of the solution is, and make sure wherever you are going wrong methodically, you have to improve on that, and then only practice more questions. So that's how you work on your weak areas. All right. Now, again, if you are a GMAT student, you don't have to do any of this manually. All of this is automated. You just have to go to your dashboard. The AI automatically analyzes your data. It gives you a lot of information, by the way. Like if you want to review the information, you can review all the information. But by default itself, it will analyze all your data and categorize it into different buckets, like solidify concept gaps, application gaps, and timing gaps. And at a click of a button, you can actually work on them. If you have concept gaps, click on the revise button. It will automatically create an improvement module for you, where you can actually get to see your specific video lessons where you are actually weak. Similarly, if you are actually weak on those concepts, you can at a click of a button even create a quiz around it, and it will even suggest what is the optimal time for that particular quiz that you should take. So all these things are so very easy for you. If you are a GMAT student, you don't have to worry about any of this. There is a lot of data on the bottom which you can actually go through and understand. But yeah, that's just about one thing. But very important aspect, one more important aspect which I want you to understand, and this is very critical again, guys, that when should you time yourself? Exactly when should you start timing yourself? So this is another critical aspect. So generally what people do is that they start timing themselves in the learning phase, because they feel that, okay, they have to get the questions right in 2 minutes that is available with them on the GMAT. But what in that case they forget is that, as I told you earlier also, in the natural learning process, when you're learning the right method, initially by default you will take extra time. So if you focus on the timing from day one, you will most likely not be able to learn the right method. There will be gaps in your understanding, you'll not be able to work on those, you'll sway away from the right methods and you'll start using shortcuts, which happens with many people. So at that, in the learning phase, do not focus on timing, focus only on learning the methods, making sure that you're using the right methods. And then once you move to the fine-tuning phase, that's when you start focusing on timing. Okay, so simple idea. In your weak areas, quick revision of those concepts, review and solutions, questions and solutions, focus on learning application. And always remember, quality is more important than quantity. Don't worry about doing like hundreds of questions on an area. Do 20 questions, but do them properly. Learn from the solutions properly. Okay, that will help you understand the things in a better way. And for your timing areas, after improving your weak areas, like first optimize your weak areas and ensure that in the timing aspect also they're actually improving, and then only you should go to the sectional test. So at least, for example, let's say in some topics you are taking 3 minutes for solving a question. If you start taking sectional tests directly, you will actually end up messing up the entire timing. So it is better that you focus on those specific areas first, reduce your timing to 2 minutes 30 seconds at least, even if not 2 minutes, bring it down a little, and then start taking sectional tests where you put yourself under more timing pressure and eventually reduce the timing. All right, I hope this all is clear to you. And generally what we recommend in the fine-tuning phase, this is a very personal thing also, because there are a lot of different things which are basically happening in the fine-tuning phase. It depends completely on who you are. We get very different use cases every single day. We can across people who come to us when they have a verbal 38 already, they want to get a 44, 45 in verbal. We also come across people who come to us with a verbal 20 or a quant 46. There was this one guy who came to us who had taken 7 attempts on the GMAT, and in none of these 7 attempts he scored more than a quant 46. The highest score he got was 46, and the last attempt was his last hoop. He worked with us, we looked at his areas, weak areas and all, and he was able to eventually get a Q50 in the 8th attempt. Okay, and that was an amazing achievement in my opinion for the student. And every student is different, we believe. So what we recommend is that you should be working with data and mentor. So generally what we do is when we work with any student, we assign a personalized mentor, a dedicated mentor to all the students, with whom they can reach out to. Basically, there's a mentor that you can reach out to every 2 weeks or even 1 week, depending on how many hours you are studying in a week. So if you're studying full time, we generally recommend once in 1 week. If you're studying part time, as in with your work, full time work, then we recommend connecting with your mentor once in 2 weeks for a strategic discussion around your current positioning. That how well have you progressed in your prep? How well are you moving? Are there any areas that you need to work on? Are there any other things that you need to do? And in your fine tuning phase, exactly what you should be doing. When should you be taking the mocks? How many mocks should you take? When should you take the GMAT? All these questions are answered by our mentors. And when we provide you dedicated mentors, they are not call center executives or student counselors who don't know anything about GMAT. They are people who have taught other people for GMAT as tutors also. They have huge experience in it. They have helped people cross the 700 marks consistently, and they're very experienced. So they're able to guide you in the right direction, and that's one of the biggest reasons why we have the highest score improvement in the industry today, even though we are one of the newest players in the industry. We bring that difference that you need, that X factor. So in case you're interested in working with us, do reach out to us. You can definitely reach out to us. But that brings us to the last stage of e-learning, which is the mock stage. Now, how do you go about mocks? Now, this is another interesting thing. Many people tell me that, okay, Piyush, how many mocks should I take and when should I take mocks? In fact, today itself, I received a question from a student that should I take one mock every week? He's just a first-time test taker. He's just starting his preparation. My point was that if you have not even covered everything that is required to be done on the test, if you get a question from an area that you have not covered till date, how are you going to do well on the mock test? You're going to basically end up pasting the mock test. Now, I understand the reason why people think about that. The reason why people think is that if you want a constant assessment of your progress, they would like to take a mock and see, okay, earlier I was at a 400, now I'm at a 450 or a 500 and so on. So that's the kind of thought process that many people have. But in reality, if you are using the right tools and the right metrics, you don't need to take mocks to understand your assessment. In fact, in the GMATWhiz platform, we will give you an assessment of your current skill score at every stage. Every stage, you will get to see metrics that, okay, you have completed 70% of your journey, 60% of your journey. You are at a 660 right now with this quant score and this verbal score. So generally, mocks, you should not waste mocks for assessment. For assessment, you should take individual tests on what you have done till now and assess based on that. So what should your mock strategy be? Your mock strategy should be like this. First of all, you should learn about the test taking and timing strategy, because that's another thing which many people don't learn. In fact, I know many people who don't even understand how the adaptive algorithm works, and they come to me and they say, I score poorly on the GMAT because I'm not able to complete the test. But in reality, the problem is not completing the test. The problem is not that you have not enough time left for the last quarter. Day before yesterday, I was speaking to one student. He said, I got a verbal 20 on the GMAT. The reason was I only had 12 minutes left for the last 10 questions. I told him that I had just 10 minutes left for the last 10 questions. I had 2 minutes less than you, but I still had a verbal 41. Tell me the reason why. The reason is I understand the algorithm much better. Much better. So it's very important that you understand the algorithm. And I know many of you might have questions in your mind. So I'm just giving you a link to one of the videos that you can watch on the same. This is the link which you can check out at your perusal later on. Do bookmark if you want to. And you can check out this video where I've covered the strategy in depth. So first learn all the strategies that are there. And then towards your last phase, again in the mock phase, you should take one mock every 3 to 4 days. Okay. And in my opinion, at GMATWhiz at least, we never recommend taking mocks without speaking to your mentor. Understand whether you're ready to take mocks or not. So first understand whether you're ready to take mocks and then only start taking mocks. Take one mock every 3 to 4 days and basically focus on a lot more on analysis. Don't take another mock before doing the analysis. Check out properly how the mock should be analyzed, how each and every step should be done. And then only you move to the next stage. In fact, I can even give you guys a video that we have on mock analysis. I should have copied it earlier, but let me just get that to you in a minute here. So basically make sure that you do the analysis also properly and then only you move to the next mock test. So that is also very critical. So I'm going to give you the link for this, how to analyze mocks basically. So you can actually watch this video to kind of understand how the mock analysis really should work and focus on the analysis part. So those of you who are in the early stages can bookmark this video, watch it later on when you are in the stage, but make sure that your mock analysis is done properly. And if your target score is like your target score is 50 to 60 points away from your current performance in the mock. For example, let's say your target score is 700. And for whatever reason, you end up getting a 620 on the mock. Then you should not take a mock every 3-4 days. You should not be doing that. Then you'll be wasting your mock test. Please make sure that you decrease the frequency and work on fine tuning again. You should go to the fine tuning phase again, identify your weak areas and work on them. Because unless you work on them, there's no magic that is going to happen. You're not going to see an improvement in your mock scores. Okay. So with that, it brings me to the end of the session. I am hoping that it gave you a crystal clear picture of how to go about your preparation, what is the strategy that you should follow, how should you create an action plan. So please feel free to let me know if you have any other questions in your mind right now. I'm gonna be here for 2 to 10 minutes, depending on how many questions you ask me, and I'm gonna answer any question that you might have right now. So please feel free to let me know about those. You can reach out to me on my email ID and my WhatsApp number as well, both of which are listed on your screen. And if you want to create a free study plan on our platform, you can definitely do so by using this link. Okay, so I have a first question from Akash. Akash says, when is the next sale for GMAT prep course coming on the GMATWhiz? So Akash, we should have a sale going on Republic Day, I guess. So it should be available from tomorrow onwards, hopefully. So you can check out our website tomorrow. Hopefully you should be able to get the sale running. We are already offering a significant discount on our product, but we do offer a slightly more substantial, like slightly more reduced price on specific days. So on the Republic Day, you can look out. Tomorrow also you can look out for it, because we generally start the sale 1 day earlier. Any other questions, guys, you have around the preparation? I'll be more than happy to take them up for you. Okay, I hope you liked the session. In case you did like it, do give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends who are preparing for the GMAT, so that they can also get an idea about how to go about it. Do let me know how did you feel about the session as well. That also motivates me. I've tried to come up with a lot of different things, keeping your perspective in mind, people who have been preparing for the first time. I've tried my best to keep the information concise as well, because when I get into the scholarship bit, the rounds bit of it, the scores bit of it, the prep time bit of it, there are a lot of questions which come up. And I really appreciate you guys not bombarding with me all those questions, because our main objective was to talk about the action plan, which we stick to. So thank you so much for that. But I tried my best to give you as much information as possible. In case you guys have any other questions, please feel free to let me know. And thank you so much, Akash, for that. All right, so I still don't see any questions as such. So I hope you guys got all your answers. So all the best for your GMAT prep from my side. It was nice talking to you guys. I'm going to end the session in another 10 seconds if I don't see any other questions. So if you want to post a question, 10 seconds is what you have. Okay, thank you so much, Sunny. I'm very happy to know that you liked the session as well. Thank you so much, guys. Okay, again, guys. Good night to all of you who are in India, and good day to all of you who are in the US. Have a nice day forward, and I hope it helps you in improving your score. Mridul, okay, Mridul has come up with a question. He says, I have a 680, planning to write in the next 3-4 months. I was scoring 700 and 710 in the mocks. Any last minute tips? So Mridul, let's communicate over a call. I'd just like to understand what exactly happened. Why did you have that gap in the score? So let's understand that, and then I will be able to give you last minute tips. Otherwise, my last minute tips are going to be very generic advices, which I'm pretty sure that some of you already know. Can you use GMAT books to prepare for, sorry, can I use CAT books to prepare for GMAT? Definitely not, Sophia. They're very different tests, honestly. You'll be over preparing for quant, under preparing for verbal. So that's how it is. Okay, guys, thank you so much for being here, and see you next very soon then. Bye.